And those of you joining online, of course, we appreciate you so much. We know you're often sandwiched between meetings and the like. So now perhaps officially, I'll just say good evening, everyone. Bienvenue on behalf of Fourth Space. Welcome. Located on unceded Indigenous lands in Ucheede, Montreal, Concordia University's Fourth Space is activated on the daily via these sorts of live events to create engagement really around the various initiatives, around the various dialogues and research projects, as well as collaborative activities that are happening across the university. It's therefore our pleasure to welcome in folks from Concordia's Black Perspectives Office and their invited guests, those of you joining us via Zoom and in person, to help wrap up the BPO's Wellness Week by hosting this panel discussion on decolonizing healing practices. And I think on that note, it will be my great pleasure to pass it over to today's moderator. Alicia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Anna. So before we begin our panel, we're going to start off with our territorial acknowledgement. So this is curated by the Decolonial Perspectives and Practices Hub. And so we want to acknowledge two separate legacies and two distinct categories of autonomous peoples, the Black and the Indigenous, through our land-specific acknowledgements. And in doing so, we grant each category of people its own space to be seen, recognized, and self-empowered, self-determined in ways that are not comparative, in ways that are not relative to one another, using their own very words and their legacies to ground us in revolutionary allyship and educational advocacy. So we'll take 10 seconds of silence after each acknowledgement in a way that expresses and utilizes silence as a modality for activistic acknowledgement and anti-colonial resistance. So I'll proceed by reading out loud to you the Indigenous land acknowledgements that were brought to us by the Concordia Indigenous Directions Leadership Group. So we want to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kanikahaga Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters we gather today. Ucheede, Montreal is historically known as the gathering place for many First Nations. Today it is home to a diverse populations of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. Now let us observe our 10 seconds of silence. Now we move on to create space for Black acknowledgement. As Black Canadians, land acknowledgements are a moment to honor the implications of being disposed of, displaced, and enslaved peoples on stolen lands, to acknowledge our solidarity with the Indigenous peoples of Canada as we frequent and benefit from their land within our shared histories of genocide, dispossession, and ongoing systemic oppression by settler colonialism. Taken from Natasha Henry, president of the Ontario Black History Association, and Chiamange Mongo from the Canadian Race Relations Association, as Black people in Canada, let us pay homage to the exploited Africans, the Blacks, and the enslaved who have risked their lives for us to be here together and live out here without any physical chains. So now let us observe 10 seconds of silence. So thank you very much. So before I introduce my guests, so let me introduce the topic of conversation and what does decolonizing healing practices mean, at least to me. For me, it means acknowledging the harm and the legacies of white supremacy and creating new ways of knowing and understanding, moving away from theories of domination and oppression. And decolonizing wellness is all about intentionally addressing systemic issues by creating new ways of belonging and connecting and healing together. And so I'm so happy to be here with everyone online and in person to share what we're be able to bring to this table and our unique approaches to being well. It's going to be really fun. And so I know as a student, I need all the help that I can get, so I'm super grateful for y'all to be here. But I know also as a Black woman, I know that Western ideas of wellness and mental health are not really created with me in mind. And so that's why this Wellness Week has been so incredible. And I'm so grateful for Tiana, the project coordinator, as well as the BPO team to put this on, because like, it's been such a great feeling to be surrounded by community. So my intention here is to create space for you guys. This is not about me. This is actually about the audience and as well as you guys to really be able to share and connect and to reflect with each other. So we'll begin with introducing our panelists. They'll introduce each other. We'll start with Brandon. Go right ahead, Brandon.
Hello everybody. So my name is Brandon Nelson Jarvis, and I am the founder of Growth Campus, and it's really was a space designed in mind for people to take care of themselves first and foremost, and then from that place lend that support and wellness to those around us, and it's mainly in the form of yoga sessions, yoga and meditation. And through those sessions, what we've been able to do is take the proceeds, our funds from the community, and then share that with the larger community in terms of school supplies and Christmas toys and stuff like that. And so that's a little bit about me and my work.
Thank you. Want to pass the mic over to someone?
I'll pass it to David.
Thank you. And much respect, Brandon. Much respect to everyone who's part of this team. My name is David Archer. I'm an anti-racist psychotherapist, and my specialization is in racial trauma and also being able to help people to recognize their awesomeness. I have a belief that for Black people, that our mental health is a form of resistance and is also a form of revolution. I just want to be sure, because I'm speaking to your whole university, I don't want to be too controversial today, but I'll do the best that I can to just to represent. But again, I just want to say many blessings to everyone who's here. I know that when I was in Concordia, I wish that I had this space. So I'm just grateful to be here. So yeah, just many blessings, and looking forward to seeing how the panel continues. Okay, would I be able to pass the mic?
Yes, pass the mic on to the next panelist, please.
Okay, I got to pass it on to Brother Ucheede. Ucheede, you got to introduce yourself, my bro.
Not a problem. Thank you, Brother David. First of all, I'd like to thank Tiana and the rest of the Black Perspectives Committee at Concordia University for including me in today's panel. I'm very happy to be here with all of you today, and I look forward to our discussion this evening. My name is Ucheede. I'm a community worker. I've been working in the Black community for several years now, and under various different capacities. Lately, I have been a facilitator for the Black Men's Circle discussion group, which is a discussion group for Black men that was held in person in Montreal. And now it's morphed into the Brothers Got Your Back WhatsApp discussion group for Black men as well. We're just coming off of a great discussion yesterday here at Concordia with some brothers. And it's a discussion group that we've been having now for the last couple of years, facilitated by my brothers Danny and Brother Fino, which is a great way for Black men to interact amongst each other. Right now, I spend most of my time, my number one job now is being a daddy to my two young boys. And my interests lie in art. I'm a visual artist, African philosophy, cosmology, history, and culture, as well as pop culture. So I'm very happy to be a part of today's panel. And I guess I'll pass the mic on to Whitney, who's the first person I see on my screen here. So I'll pass the mic over to Whitney.
Thank you for that, Ucheede. Greetings, everyone. This is so sick. This hybrid, in-person, online, I've never done something like this. It's kind of exciting. I also appreciate in advance folks just giving me grace, if I can't tell who's online and who's not. I guess this is the part where I introduce myself. My name is Whitney French. I use she, her pronouns, just as an image description really quick. I'm a 30-something-year-old Black person with shoulder-length dreads, wearing a burgundy sweatshirt with a white decorative pattern on it. There's a bedboard behind me, and further back behind me is a white closet. and I'm calling in from Nemiska Istishu First Nations Reserve in Northern Quebec. So I'm really excited that I get to join y'all virtually, which is super beautiful. About me in a nutshell, I'm a writer, I'm an educator, arts educator specifically. I'm an editor, workshop facilitator, but I'm also a middle child and a bit of a troublemaker, tree climber. I am the founder of the nomadic creative writing program called Writing While Black, which is exactly what it sounds like, Black folks coming together to write collectively. And we've done that in various cities, including Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, Detroit, Halifax, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also the co-founder of Hush Harbor, which is the only Black queer feminist press here in Canada. I'm a mentor, a mentee, a sister, a friend, a daughter, and I'm a work in progress, like a lot of my writing is. And it's just an honor to be here. Shout out to Tiana. We met at Writing While Black, and for everyone else who coordinated to make this happen. And I'm gonna pass the mic to Lisa.
Thank you. Wow, this is beautiful. Thank you for this. It's so beautiful. I'm all emotional. Okay, so my name is Lisa Andejo. I'm a graduate of Concordia. I'm a psychotherapist. I work with in the community. I'm of Rwandan heritage, and so I started inside of my community, working on questions of genocide and identity and meaning making after large scale violence, and I've been at Concordia I was at Concordia for about 15 years in the Center for Oral History and Digital Storytelling, because I figured that one-on-one psychotherapy had its place, but that I didn't address the sort of the collective, the social, the political aspects of some of the things that we're dealing with. And so I did my thesis on arts-based approaches to life stories of genocide and war, and so I'm really happy to be a part of the community, the larger community, the larger Black community. It feels so good to be together. I mean, yeah. So I'm part of the. I work with the Black Healing Center to offer the Black collective care circles for women. We offer 2 circles. One is working with what is, and one is working with trauma. I'm thinking a lot about the ways in which people say that in our communities people have a lot of stigma around asking for help and so on, and I find that au contraire, it's not true. I think that there are more people asking for help than there are people that have, that are trained. And so I'm thinking a lot about how do we train our communities at the community level, because there's a lot of the care that we need that doesn't need to be specialized in these ways. So I'm thinking a lot about sharing, capacity building. Voila. We could talk, but that's what we're here for, so I'll shut up for now. And sorry about that. I don't know who I have to point to. Yes, to you.
Hello, everybody. I guess you guys can hear me. Can you hear me? Yeah, great. Well, I feel so grateful to be amongst you guys. Hello, hello. My name is Alpha Estefanos. I am a filmmaker, mindfulness educator, wisdom bearer. It's so hard when you're a multi-hyphenate to kind of put your multiple identities and experiences into kind of a moment of expressing that. But I'm all the things and a work in progress, as someone else on this panel said earlier. And so constantly exploring, and a lot of my journey and my work has been around, intergenerational healing modalities. Have a background in psychotherapy, but I work full-time in film and television, and being in those spaces has been quite interesting as a person of color, but also being around that amount of privilege and power and visibility. And so, I'm just learning how to share all of those experiences and wisdom that continues to be passed down to me in models that feel relevant and true to who I'm working with on one-on-one modality formats or group, and currently designing and teaching a mindfulness-based acting program at the National Theatre School of Canada. So this is where I'm at, and so I feel very fortunate to be amongst you and to meet all of you, because it's not every day that we get to have this.
Yeah.
So it's special. I was not expecting this. Now I'm here and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you came in person.
It's very gratifying and heart-opening. So thank you for having me. I'm excited for this. Yeah.
Well, so as you can see, these are our panelists, our incredible 6 panelists who are here for us as students to be able, we finally get this type of access that we've been begging for. So they're here to answer any and all of our questions. So please, if you have any questions, if there's something you want to pipe in the audience, please feel free to engage with us. We want to hear from you. Because I have some guiding questions, I will direct it to one, but these questions are open to everyone on the panel, as well as for our audience members to think about. So I guess I'll begin with you, Alpha, the first kind of question. How did you come to recognize the power of intergenerational healing? Because you mentioned in your filmmaking, and that is a lot of work about intergenerational issues. And so I was wondering, how did you even come to recognize, oh, that's something I want to explore and it's important?
It's a great question. I think it came in bits and pieces over time. I think as for any of us, when you were going through your own process and figuring out your own stuff and starting to, have a lot of what's happening in your unconscious mind, in your culture, in your environment come to light and to surface in your everyday life, you start to recognize certain pattern and you start to ask why. Why am I behaving this way? Why am I showing up this way? Why am I feeling this way? And so it was a combination of, I think, my environment, but also a desire. I think a desire from within. I think that also comes from my ancestors and from asking these questions, to want to be better and to want to be in a better space for myself and for my family and for my community. Because I would see certain behaviors and I was like, I don't know if this is true to who I am or if it's a form of conditioning. And how do I transcend that, not necessarily just alone, but in companionship, in community. So there was a lot of I don't knows and asking questions and being uncomfortable. And I figured out through having conversations with people who have had more experiences than me or experiences that differ, I was able to kind of learn that model existed in the first place. And then be like, oh, okay, this is a real thing that our ancestors actually did. And so I can integrate that now and in a way that feels true to my current experience and to today's modern life.
Way of thinking.
Yeah. So that's kind of the gist of how I started to waddle my way into intergenerational healing. And I was fortunate enough to meet, very serendipitously or throughout my life experiences and travels and failures, mentors or people who didn't appear as mentors, but were actually the very people I needed, to meet, people who challenged me and made me ask the right questions I didn't want to ask myself or look at. And that conversation with people who were older than me, but also younger. I worked with a lot of kids at a certain point, and there was so much wisdom and there was so much, intuitive knowing and connection to life that I had lost, that they had access to, and their creativity that I recognized was a form of me learning. And so learning to set aside my ego and keep myself in check and have that, multiple generational way of connecting with other people, which that's it.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. It's fascinating because there is a practice where I do think, well, I do think about like the 5-year-old Alicia. What would she think about and feel, and how would she approach the situation? So I do wonder about how we're neglecting the children in our community about their wisdom that they have. And as well, like we kind of focus a lot on the adults and thinking, but there are different types of mentorships and they come along in different forms. Does anyone have anything else to add about intergenerational healing? I'm sure, Lisa, you might have some things to add.
I'm not someone like, I've been working on the Rwandan genocide against the Tutsi, so the genocides against the Tutsi in Rwanda, but I'm not a survivor of that. I am the grandchild of someone who was killed in the 60s. I'm the daughter of someone who was imprisoned in the 60s, and the granddaughter of someone who fled and lived in refugee camps for 3 decades. So this thing about, intergenerational is that's, there's always one in the family that ends up sort of like this stuff, and then and then you are with siblings, and the next one is like, I don't know why, but they sort of lean in. It's all good, and but it's like you carry it, and it's like that's what you have to. Okay, fine. So we and the beautiful thing is that you do it for your family, but then also the rest of the community can use it, and so then you're serving. So then it's bigger than just you, and then it's like, whew, okay, that makes sense, right? So when we were working with genocide survivor, and the thing here in Jojage is that you can actually, because people come from everywhere, you can have a peer group of genocide survivors. So we had Rwandans, Armenian descendants, right? Descendants of Armenians, Cambodians, descendants of the Shoah, talking for like a weekend, like talking to each other over and what across the board. Even they have different religions, they have different worldviews, but the one thing that they worry about the most is how do you care for the children? How do you transmit without harming, right, the children? And that is like across the board. So it's real.
Very, very real. It's very interesting to see how community also plays a role in passing along knowledge. And Brandon, you mentioned working in community and how that's one of your favorite things. And I'm just wondering, what is your favorite part about working with community? What does community mean to you, and what does it make you feel?
So I know somebody else mentioned like that people didn't care, or people don't care. And so I grew up with that in mind. And so like, I would say both directly and indirectly was communicated to me that we can't ask for help. We shouldn't ask for help. It's a like, we're giving up our pride if we ask for help, if we ask for handouts. And that left me with the notion that like, man, people don't care. Like, we're here struggling. We don't have like food. We don't have this, like why isn't nobody helping? And it shapes those thoughts, like they shape your world, right? Whether you think people care or you don't, like it's going to be shaped by those thoughts, and you're going to see the world very differently if you think people don't care, and you're probably going to act very differently towards other people, right? And it's not true. I've come to realize that it's not true. And even if it is true, I want to be the reason why people think that people care. And so like I've always told myself around Christmas or around back to school, man, I wish somebody would just come knock on my door and just hand me a backpack full of school supplies or a Christmas toy. And like myself and with a beautiful community of people have put ourselves in that position where we're able to do that for other people. And I know that the children, like, they're not going to remember like the Christmas present, like 10 years, 15 years down the line, but they're going to remember that somebody cared and that somebody was there for them, somebody thought about them. And it wasn't a family member, it wasn't a friend, it was a complete stranger. Like, we don't know each other, but I care enough for you and I love you enough to like want to support you. And hopefully that shifts your world, that changes your perspective. And then, yeah, you carry that on to the next generation, stuff like that. So it's really like, it starts, I think, with yourself, and like Lisa said, be brave enough and willing to unpack all of this like hundreds of years of like really heavy stuff. But if you're able to do that and put yourself in a position where you can share that, I don't see a more purposeful way of living life. So that's what kind of gets me up in the morning.
It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow, it's really well said. I'm not sure if anyone has anything to add in terms of your favorite parts about working in the community. Has anything sparked? I'm sure, Ucheede, you with your Black care circles, there is some sort of, what's the best part about being with all these, this community?
Absolutely. It's there's so many positive and good things that come out of working with our communities. For me, since the 90s, I've had the opportunity to meet and be with so many people from across the island of Montreal. And it's developed my own particular Pan-Africanist views, seeing the commonality amongst Black peoples throughout the city, whether they come from Haiti, West Africa, the Caribbean, or even the United States. And instead of seeing the differences amongst our people, I've come to see all the things that really bind us together as a common people. And that's been a true joy and beautiful experience to be able to take part in the lives of so many different Black people from across the island who have come from virtually every single part of the world. You can find them here in the city of Montreal. And learning about our people through that kind of experience, through doing public speaking, working with children, doing Black history classes with kids and so forth. It's been a great joy. So for me, working with our people, I've been able to learn about our cultures, our history, but really it's developed my own sense of Pan-Africanism amongst Black people, which I relish in now.
That's so great. And especially because you get to, indulge in all the different types of food to eat. That's all for me, being in community and food there's an intrinsic value, I have to say, when it comes to community. And then we don't really recognize that, especially in this world today. And Ucheede, I was wondering, what is your definition of wellness? Because we talk about wellness, we talk about healing, but we don't really talk about the nitty-gritty of like, what do you mean by when you come with that? So I'm wondering, what's your definition of wellness or of healing or whichever?
Well, I think before I would give that answer, and there's really, in my mind, there's no like right or wrong answer from anyone, but I think I like the title of today's or this particular theme that's been presented, that is decolonizing healing practices. So I think even before I give the definition of my personal definition of healing, we have to think in terms of it's time for us to begin to decolonize our own definitions of what we've been taught, what healing and wellness actually means. And a lot of those definitions come from, Western traditions, European practices. And oftentimes, unfortunately, we as Black people, as descendants of African people, we're on the peripheries of those definitions. We're not seen as part. When they were defining wellness, they weren't including us. They were defining it according to their own worldview, their own perspective, their own relationship to their environment. And we were not part of that particular definition. So for me, wellness or healing really represents and means balance for me. It means having balance in our life. Again, the Western concepts that I used to accept or that are a part of my life, it was very polarizing. You had to be either well or not well, good or bad, right or wrong. And by studying African traditions and African customs, I'm learning more and more that that wasn't really how we viewed and had a relationship with the world and even with ourselves. In our traditional practices and customs, I saw that instead of the focus being on the self, and there's a lot of focus on self nowadays, which is not wrong in and of itself, self-care and things of that nature. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But in traditional African practices that I've come to learn and read about, I see that the self is really just an extension or a synthesis of the community. And some of the other answers that I heard before, you saw the importance of community in our well-being. For instance, I was studying and reading a little bit about the Vimbuzo dance, and I think it's in Malawi. And this was a traditional dance that was used in the 19th century that women were using to heal themselves from the trauma of the British invading their land. And what they would do is they would form a circle. The women in the community would form a circle around the woman who needed that healing, the women and children, and the males would start the drumming, and the woman would come into a trance, and through that process, a healing process would come about. I think for us, we need to restart reincorporating some of those African, Caribbean traditional values and healing practices in our healing today, because they're often being lost in the Western concepts of what we consider to be healing. And some of that colonization process or that colonizing mentality that we have is this idea that everything that is Western and European is right or better, or we put more value in it. So we tend to look down, some of us, or put less value in traditional African concepts. And we even lift up and venerate other concepts such as, indigenous people or Eastern philosophy, but African philosophy, African traditional values, African traditional healing is never seen in that light. And I personally would like to see that changed amongst ourselves. I want to see much more respect and value placed in how we used to connect and value the world, value ourselves and with our relationship at that time. It doesn't mean that everything from African tradition and African culture from the past is necessarily right for us now. We have to learn how to study and extract what can be used today in our modern context in which we're living in and get the benefit from those things. So for me, wellness and healing is balance. And even if you study like the ancient Egyptian, they had the term that was called ma'at, which represents 7 principal values: truth, reciprocity, balance, harmony, order, morality, righteousness. This was a traditional African way for us to relate to the world and relate to ourselves, which gave healing and balance to our own lives. So again, for me, I think the best word that I can describe healing for me or wellness would be balance, having a balance in all of our life. Not too much of this, not too much of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, having an overall balance in our life through the physical, spiritual, mental, social, all of these things are important for us as a community and as a people to be well.
Yes, so true. And when you mention balance, I think about how I come to understand wellness and how I find there's some sort of balance between these different aspects of self, and then like, of course, further on to connect to community, but it's about spiritual connection, about emotional connection and physical connection, physical wellness as well. And I find when I talk about rhythm and dancing and how that can link to healing, I find it super fascinating when you go back to see what our ancestors have done before they had these fancy therapists and fancy apps that we have nowadays to help with our mental wellness, to see what our ancestors were doing before then. And so that's great. Does anyone would like to add to what Ucheede have said?
I just want to say that I'm part of that Brothers Got Your Back group on WhatsApp, and I think it's such a incredible space. Again, like I think the world is taking a big shift. And so when I was growing up, the Black men that I used to kind of look up to, they, besides having the technology, but they didn't have that support system. They didn't have that camaraderie. Even if you were like, what they found kind of their community in was gang culture, right? So in gang culture, it's kind of the same way where, like, you'll have that brotherhood, you'll have that support, you'll have all that stuff, but you kind of have to do something that you might not be willing to do to kind of show your allegiance and stuff like that. And now it's taken a huge shift where, like, I know if I'm going through a hard time, I can pick up my phone and I can write to these guys, and somebody's gonna answer me, and somebody's gonna, give me advice or mentor me, or if I have to, go out for a walk or coffee or whatever, I know I have this right in my pocket. And I think it's something beautiful. So super appreciative. I thought you were going to be here in person, brother. So happy to connect with you virtually, though.
Likewise, brother. Likewise.
I would love to sorry, this is I'm taking, I don't know if I'm segueing. I'm working my postdoc, so I've worked on oral histories, and so oral history is working with the stories of people who were witnesses to history, right? And now in my postdoc, I'm working with pre-colonial Rwandan wisdom stories, and I would love to invite to have a conversation about the ways in which sort of things of the past, like those traces and healing. How does that come together for people today? That I'm really excited about possibilities. Like, I think that there are traces that we can work with. Of course, it's always sort of, we have to be careful and learn to discern what works for us today. But isn't that the case for any kind of wisdom tradition, right? Like, there's something that is said, and then the wisdom is not only to read, but it's not only the what, but it's also the when. What do you apply when, right? And so to learn this appropriateness, I think, is a really interesting thing. I'm excited. Yeah.
If I could just
Please,
maybe.
please,
Yeah.
this is your table.
Go ahead, Whitney, then I'll.
Oh, I appreciate that, Alpha. Okay, so literally everything that y'all, so I'm a writer, so if you see me with the pen, everything y'all are saying, I'm not being rude. It's just like brilliance. Yo, dope, check that out. What is that? Okay, I'm gonna go Google that later. So that's happening. Just so you know, that's what's happening there. Oh my goodness. So Lisa, I would love to reconnect with you, just because kind of where my practice and my artistic heart is with storytelling, right? So I'm a writer, but I also generally consider myself a storyteller, and think a lot about what stories are told and which stories are not told. And a huge part of decolonizing healing practices, and you spoke to this beautifully, right? Certain healing modalities, certain mythologies, certain principles within this Western context are given way more light, way more love, and way more credibility than others, particularly when we're speaking about kind of African traditions, right? And so when I'm thinking about what is my contribution around healing practices, it's like, it's not just controlling the narrative, it's about the multiplicity of different narratives and the responsibility of telling a story. Like, all of that is like deeply important. Like, I just had, everything y'all were saying was just like brilliant. But to talk to Brandon's point in particular about community and like this beautiful story about like getting a Christmas gift from community, it really reminds me of what is love when it's action, right? It doesn't actually remember like, oh, I got a pair of shoes, or I got this. Like, what does it mean to receive love from a stranger? What does it mean to receive love from community? What does it mean to receive love from so many different sources that you can't even put a face to them, right? Yeah. Those are the types of narratives, those are type of the healing modalities, those are kind of the practices that, you know, I personally think are intrinsically Black. And that can only happen when we gather. That can only happen when we connect with each other continuously and we make that effort. So healing isn't about like hashtag self-care or how to get myself right. It's like we are all deeply connected and responsible for each other, because colonization does the complete opposite of that, which is to sever each other. Anyways, I just had to say that before it fell out my brain. Go ahead, Alpha, speak that truth.
That's amazing. I feel like every single point that we just shared was, you know, part of that storytelling kind of thread, and we're like all threading and weaving together. And right now, just hearing all of this, it just brought me back to the question that you asked. And I thought of how, for me, wisdom, I had to reconnect with my body when I went back home. My family's from Ethiopia, so I had to go back home and understand, because I was born here. So going back and reconnecting with the land, but also reconnecting with what it means to sit in community and what that looks like, but what that feels like in my body. And being able to sit with all the bits and pieces of community, sharing, receiving from strangers, being able to also give of your time, of your love, of your space, but also, you know, that decolonial aspect of, you know, the internalized racism that we have towards the shame around our own practices and the ignorance around our own practices. Being in that kind of space where there are other people that reflect me back is so deeply healing. And so to have this space as well is so reflective of that. And through the storytelling and the sharing and the feeling seen, it's phenomenal. So that's it. I just wanted to riff off of all of you. So bless all of you. Thank you.
I'm in awe. I'm just like, there's all this wisdom, all this knowledge in one room. It's incredible. So excited. I guess I want to hear more from Whitney in ways, in terms of how does writing contribute to decolonizing our minds and our bodies and our spaces? Because you mentioned in your event when we attended the Writing While Black, which was like so great. It was amazing. You did mention how we don't see people like us in books, in movies and things like that, and how can that be harmful, and in which ways in terms of writing can we re-emerge and re-heal?
I love what you said there, Alicia, about re-healing. I could talk about this for a really long time, so just to honor all the other panelists, I'm gonna try to be succinct. I think a lot about the words decolonization. I think a lot about the words liberation, and a lot of our actions overlap those things. And the thing about decolonization, because of the D in the colonization, it's an acknowledgement of like white supremacy, colonization, all of the different systems and modalities and levels of oppression that have done all the things. Like, I don't have to go into it because very, very smart people in the room, very smart people in the Zoom room. But when I think about liberation, what that really sparks in me is this idea of maximizing our collective potential and rewriting a future or rebuilding a future, and not necessarily using whiteness as a reference or running away from whiteness, or even like liberation is like, we don't even talk about decolonizing no more, right? Like, it's a nice thing to move towards, and there's so many more gifted and talented scholars that like really speak towards what Black liberation movements look like, and most likely folks on this panel are familiar with that. But what does that all have to do with writing? Writing is about telling a story, and storytelling. I was told once by a mentor that storytelling is deeply powerful, and that you have to be responsible for that power. And the power isn't always part of the binary of good or evil, but like, let's be real, colonization used a narrative of storytelling to justify using Black folks as labor, to justify stealing land from indigenous peoples, to justify all of these horrendous things. So story in the wrong hands, or in particular hands, can create a massive effect. So the more opportunities for me in my very, very small, short, insignificant, but exciting time on this planet to encourage Black folks to write their own stories and use their own storytelling capacity for healing is just like, okay, cool, I can do that, bet. And going all the way back to Lisa's introduction about there's always one in the family that's, and I love that gesture. It's the word that comes to mind is a karma breaker. Right? It's not necessarily like breaking the cycle, it's recreating a new cycle. So what is the karma in a particular narrative? And there's like, I am a troublemaker. I said that in my intro, like people in my family don't want me writing certain narratives because it scares them, because it talks about family histories, family truths, it talks about colonial histories, it talks about colonial truths. My family's from, or our lineage is from Jamaica, so there's like this nationalism, but like what is the actual bedrock of that nationalism? Sometimes stories are coined as too radical. And so when we think about healing, it's just space. And writing for me and for so many others have been colonized as like, I am going to English class, I have to write a paper, I have to write an essay, I have to spell things right, I have grades. I'm like, how radical would it be if our storytelling is embodied? Right? How radical is it when our storytelling is like oral? How radical is our storytelling when we are using not just one, but 3, 4, 5 different languages? How radical is our storytelling when our languages are comrades? You know what I mean? And one really quick thing, I'll, disperse into other folks who are interested to carry on those threads, is writing while Black was my response to desperately needing community. I'm going to say that again because it just said the internet is unstable, but writing while Black was my response, desperately needing community, like other Black writers in a space. Because as much as I love reading like the greats, like, James Baldwin's, Maya Angelou's, bell hooks, like all of them, I need bodies, I need blood, I need bone. You know what I mean? And looking and seeing other Black folks who want to write, Black folks who've written 10 books, Black folks who haven't written in 10 years. That gathering, one, threatens the white folks, and I don't care, and that's exciting, and that's radical, and that makes me feel good, and knows that I'm in the right direction. But more importantly, that is how we build capacity towards liberation, not just decolonizing. Okay, Whitney, you done. We're just gonna, I get carried away.
Oh, no, please. This is your space to be able to talk about these things. I feel like we don't get the opportunity enough to be able to just have these sessions, these talks about wellness, about Black wellness. It's so amazing. Yes, Lisa.
You can interrupt me because I've spoken before. So to me, the writing, like the idea of being an author, that's what my dissertation was also about. It was like being sick of somebody else telling me what my experience is. It is, we can't do that anymore. We have to express what our experience is, and in academic spaces like this, we also have to theorize in the ways in which it makes sense to us. So if knowledge for me is not built like a house, but then what is the metaphor that is going to speak to the way that I understand the world and that I want to share and that other people can work with? That is like, I want us to have openings where we can say, okay, oh, that metaphor speaks to me. That way of seeing the world speaks to me, so that we can exchange and build, or it doesn't have to be build like the house built. We can also thicken. We can feed a fire. We can
do whatever we want to do, and that's the whole point. Is yes, please, Uchenna.
I like what. Thank you, Lisa, for what you just shared there. It's making me think about, again, one of the areas of interest for myself is the importance of mythology, of reading and understanding and knowing our traditional mythologies, and through that, we can begin to understand through mythology these metaphors that apply to our lives. I think mythology is not, or at least African mythology is not what we've been taught, like just a bunch of talking animals, let's say. Mythology was our way of, of showing, or how we had our relationship with the world, with nature, with ourselves. And I think if we start to understand some of those relationships that made us who we are as a people, it can give us a better understanding of how we can heal ourselves today. And for instance, in the West, like, again, I brought up before, in the West, generally the way we think is, it's good or bad, it's right or wrong, it's good or evil, and right always, and good is always victorious over evil. That's something we've been taught. So now, as a young boy, as a young girl, you're growing up and you're seeing America is on top of the world. They're successful economically. So you automatically make this association that, well, I guess if they're doing so well, that must mean they're good, because good always wins. Good always conquers evil. So if America's doing so well, that must mean they are good. And we can see in our experience that's not necessarily the case. So when I studied African mythologies, Caribbean folklore, good and evil are not necessarily embodiments or polarities. For instance, the Anansi tales. When the Christian missionaries came and studied the Anansi tales in West Africa or in the Caribbean, they couldn't understand how this, what they call a trickster, was doing these things. So they immediately labeled Anansi as evil, as being a representation of the devil. But that's not what it was. He has served a purpose. Those tales served a purpose, and those purposes were for us to grow in wisdom. Anansi was frequently the wisest, or an extremely wise person or character. But in the Christian mythology or the Christian thought, he was evil. And we need to start breaking away from those exclusive Western ways of seeing the world and begin to embrace how we saw the world and how we experienced life, how we experienced nature, how we experienced each other. And through community and things of that nature, I think we can do that. So I think it's very, very important that we start placing African traditional folklore mythology, give it the care and the study that it deserves.
David, I see you nodding your head. Do you want to share any of your thoughts?
Yes, it's just that, again, there's just so much knowledge that is in the room. And even just thinking about, as Uchenna was talking about, it's so important for us to know that even when we talk about mindfulness, is that, because I wrote about it in Black Meditation, is that some of these origins that we talk about for meditation, it's like we say that it's over to the East and then we conveniently skip over Africa. It's one of the biggest continents. You can fit Canada, the States, you could fit a whole bunch of different countries in there. You know how they even change up the size and the organization on the world map to make it look like Africa's smaller than it actually is. And when we talk about world history, conveniently, because white supremacy is very fascinating, because what it can do is it could change time and space. So when we talk about space, is that for some reason when I was younger, I always thought that Egypt was in the Middle East. I never thought, we didn't conceive that Black people can build pyramids. And when we talk about time, is what will happen is that we're going to say things like that we are descended from slaves. It's a very interesting thing that even in the words of saying that we are descended from slaves is to cut us off from the interruption of white imperialist colonialism. It's to cut us off from who our ancestors were before they were captured. And because I work as a trauma therapist, my job is really to help people to not be afraid of their past. And my job is to help people to recover their memory. And the main problem that I see in our society is that it's not only the individuals who are traumatized, it is the society itself that it suffers from a form of trauma. As Canadians, we are going to see ourselves, as Ucheede was talking about, because I like that idea, because Ucheede, what you're saying is like, there's all these binaries, good, bad, man, woman, black, white, and we're not looking at the space in between. So even being a Canadian, there'll be people that will say, well, racism is not a problem here. And then, ask our ancestors, ask our indigenous brothers and sisters, ask the black people that were enslaved over here. And so it's just very convenient how white supremacy tends to impact not only time and space of saying that our beginning, when we say in Black History Month, when we say is the first black scholar or the first black teacher or the first black, when they say that, they're controlling time. And they're saying that it's the first from when white people were relevant. They're saying that it's the first from when white people were involved. So if we are really serious about decolonizing, there's a few things. We have to not emphasize the letters, the alphabets that are after our names. If we're serious about decolonizing, then we have to start to think again about how we can heal from our own communities, because it's possible. We've done it. We've done it before Freud, before Sigmund Freud and all of his strange theories. We are some of the first healers. We are some of the first teachers. Medu Neter, okay? Where they call it hieroglyphics, okay? We are some of the first people who have been able to write down our histories. And so it's so convenient the way how they mystify us and they make us believe that we are not the ones who create knowledge. We are the ones who dance. We are the ones who perform for white people, like for the Super Bowl. Most important thing is, they'll say shut up and dribble for sports and all that. Same type of thing for football. It's like you're going to lose your job if you take a knee and if you can really demonstrate that you're black. Even in my field of psychology, it's a very white field. And even some of the like IQ tests, for example, Lisa might know about this as well, is that many IQ tests, there's a social context where depending on your history, if you're a black person, you might not score as much as a white person because they're going to use words that are more familiar with certain types of individuals. So they can construct the idea of blackness being inferior to this binary of whiteness. But the key thing to know is that, as I think it was Whitney that was saying it, is that the narrative of white supremacy is just that. It is just a story that has been said over and over. All my clients who are traumatized, it is narratives that have been implanted into them to say that this is who they are. And so that is why I'm not joking, I'm serious when I'm saying that your healing is a revolutionary act. If you as a black person are able to recover and say you're proud of being a black man, and you're proud of being a black woman, then you have fought back against this idea of white supremacy, this heteropatriarchy, and all the other madness that is really at the core of the mental health issues that we see.
Wow, well said. Does anyone, I would love to be able to open the floor up to more than just my questions. If you want, raise up your hand and we'll get you a mic so that the people online, they're coming with one. You guys can keep yours because it might be, you guys are going to get questions too. So don't rush off.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So I have a lot of questions, but I'll stick to one for now. Maybe we could ask more later. I always struggle with this idea of not being black enough as like a mixed person. Like I've been told by many white people that I don't look black, or that, oh, you could pass. And even my grandmother, on my mom's side, it's like she always got the better jobs because she was light skinned. She always, like her sisters are always jealous of her because she's light skinned. And like Like just that whole idea of not being Black enough kind of bothers me. And then people always assume that I'm not from Canada too. That's another thing, that's annoying. Like because I'm of color, I can't be from here. I'm literally like the 5th generation here. Like I've been here for a while. And just people always asking, where are you from? Like, why can't I be from here? Why can't we be from here as Black people? Like, why do I understand the callback to our ancestry and such, but like, I don't even know where my ancestors are from. I just know here. I just know now.
Yeah.
So maybe we could talk. I'm not sure if it's a question, it's more of a comment, but maybe we can start a discussion on that.
Yes, for sure. Who would, I wonder if one of our panelists would like to begin.
Yeah, sure. It's just the thing is that it's a struggle for me. I'm a Black Jamaican, middle name African Canadian. Okay, I got to put in all my hyphens because it's important that we can't skip out on one of them. The interesting thing is that because I'm located in this fake nation state, and also like located in Quebec, what happens is that I'm an Anglophone. So what's interesting is that because I'm an Anglophone, and it's like, it means that the letters for signage has to be smaller for me, that I need to wear glasses in order to see a sign because it will be unfair to certain types of individuals. Okay, this is not logical, this is psychological. What I'm going to say is that on some level, I'm treated as if I am an immigrant, despite the fact that I've lived here my whole life. The difficulty is that in some circles, because we didn't talk about this, but I was hoping we were going to talk about it, is that it's too simplistic for us to just say that the only issue is just white people, because white supremacy doesn't have a color. So there's ways that even people who look like us might attack us. There's ways that white supremacy can act through Black people, and that there's ways that we can have Black skin and then have to wear white masks, and that we can use ways of being able to put down one another. Okay, it's so in our culture, the amount of energy that we as Black people will put towards dragging down a Black person, and if we could put a fraction of that energy towards fighting white supremacy, yo, this thing would be done. It would be done in no time. Yo, anytime that there's a crisis about a Jesse Smollett or like a Cosby or something, it's like our attention goes towards trying to pull down Black people. And of course, like, you know, the thing is that Cosby's not a perfect individual or perfect example, but it's just to say that our energy always goes towards what Black people are doing wrong as a collective. But what would happen if we came together and we were like, yo, it doesn't matter about your shade or your complexion. Yo, it doesn't matter about like your sexuality. You're still part of our family. And it is this strategy of making it so that it is us against one another that maintains this the lack of progress that we see. It is the problem. Like, look, the fact that we're even having this conversation itself is an act of resistance. The fact that you guys were able to develop BPO is an act of resistance. The fact that we had a wellness week, okay, of pure Black people, Black people things that, Black people are front and center. I'm saying all of this just for you to know that don't let anybody tell you about your Blackness. Race itself is a social construction. So the recovery that you have is going to be about like exploring what it means for you to be Black, because society is always going to want to try and tell you what your Blackness is. But remember that you're Black because you're beautiful. You're beautiful because you're Black. Done. You know what I mean? Yo, no explanation. You don't have to explain these things.
It's done.
Yeah. See me, sir? That's what's up.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for that response. It was really great. I just wanted to add to that, like, just being in this space is like really amazing. Just seeing all Black faces in a university, it never happens. Like, I'm usually the only Black person in the class, and then it's like we talk about slavery and they turn to me, or like, we're often asked to speak for the community.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, that's a problem in and of itself. But yeah, I think that's a really great discussion we're having, and it's great to be in this space with fellow Black people.
Yeah. We got another question from the audience.
Hi. So my just to respond to what you're saying, I'm also often the only Black person in the room in academic spaces, and in the literature courses we often talk about race and we often talk about Blackness, and to hear white people argue different points of Black experience,
It's so hard.
it's surreal. It's surreal. And yeah, so it's anyway. My question is, so my question is regarding, I guess, the discussion of generational healing and community and ancestry and decolonizing. How do you, I guess, how do you hold the sorrow of like, of everything and everything that's been lost? Because I know that to heal, you have to acknowledge and face and accept the sorrow that's there, which is a very difficult thing to do. And I find in myself like a huge disconnect sometimes from Blackness or anything related to that, because to acknowledge that is also to acknowledge the sorrow, and it's so hard to hold. And I think also that like kind of maybe this is like a part B to that same question is, you know, when trying to look back at ancestry, I know a lot of people don't even know where their family is from. I'm like, for me, I'm Haitian, Puerto Rican, Dominican. So I know that my family comes from there. I know also like the roots of the Taino indigenous people there. I know also the, you know, roots from Africa, but it's like, it's like I don't even speak, I speak English, which is a colonial language. I can't even communicate to my grandparents in their language. And so it's like, how, I don't know, how do you navigate even trying to know your family, or even trying to, let alone like the greater ancestral community? So just to reiterate, sorrow and ancestry.
Oh, so when so I was going on and on to my mother at one point, and I said, you know, I wanted to, I was really, there was a thing, and then I said that I wrote, and I performed this. I said that I was really, really mad at my grandfather because he was of the generation that had let colonizers in. And I was telling him, what did you do? And look what you've done. And then my parents were like, ooh, how could you, you know, they were very shocked. And so then my mother found this elder, a Rwandan elder. So Mutkware was a man who knew both my grandfathers, and he lived in Toronto. It's like, what? So then I was allowed to meet him. She invited him into our home, and so I was like, and he's this beautiful, beautiful, you know, tall older man, and so I was like, and then my mother said, you know, she gave him food, and we sat down at the table, and she was like, okay, go. You wanted to talk, ask him. And I was like, so what happened, right? And he just sort of like, he talked to me, like he said some things, right? He was like, you know, back in the day, and then I don't know exactly what he said. It's like, whoa, whoa. But I was so, you know, what I got from it, and I was that they tried their best and they lost. And I was like, okay, we're doing that, right? Like, we're doing our best, right? We're not winning all the time. Okay, I can get like, okay. And the fact that that I could ask and sort of like, bah! And that he was like, to me, something inside of me stopped fighting the loss, because he was beautiful, right? And he was upright, he was dignified, right? And that's all we need. So we lost the battle, we're still around, life's going on, la vie est longue, huh? So let's, it's a few years later, I asked him, I was talking to him, and he goes like, you don't understand what colonization is, right? And it's to explain to me because he lived it, right? He lived the ways in which they were not allowed to do things, the ways in which things were being broken apart for, like, on purpose, right? In real life, and he couldn't. It's not like when we see colonization, I mean, in my mind, the word took away, for example, sort of technological supremacy, right? Like it's you come there with arms, and you it's like somebody's stronger than you, right? And I remember, like, when I'm working now with the stories, for example, and I was thinking, I don't want to talk about decolonization again. I don't want to center that thing again. I want to move away from that. And then I was thinking, how am I going to talk about that? And then I was thinking about the drum. Every reign, so the people call it kings, but it's not kings. Kings is a Western word. So the mwami, right? The reign of the mwami. There was a drum. the last drum is in the museum. And when my husband saw the drum, he was like, "Oh, there are like dried testicles all around it, right?" And I was like, okay. And so those I didn't think about that, right? But he showed me that, and all around it. And what were those things? Those things were the spoils of war, because Rwanda was not a peaceful, necessarily always peaceful country. There were times of expansion. There were times where people would annex other spaces, right? Would they do that always with that it would be peaceful all the time? No. In the stories, you hear of people going to a place and marrying the daughters there and sort of mixing. But I'm sure that there were some that were armies going and fighting and annexing territory and taking. So those. And then I was thinking, okay, so maybe those stories of ours are like our, like maybe this is like taxidermy. Maybe those are our dried testicles that they have put on microfilms and that are behind the walls of the paywalls of the library, of the US Library of Congress, or the research libraries. Maybe. But we can wake the stories. We're here. We're alive. We're beautiful.
Yes, David, go right ahead.
So I just want to, whoa, sorry, my books almost fell off of this table. So the thing is, for this question what was the name of the person who asked the question? We should have got the people's names, because everyone's name is precious here.
Nina.
Okay. So the thing is that for me, so I wrote this book called Anti-Racist Psychotherapy and Confronting Systemic Racism and Healing Racial Trauma. I wrote it after the George Floyd protests, and at the time I was filled with so much rage and so much sorrow and so many emotions. And I realized that I needed to do something with these emotions in a way that would be restoring my mental health. And just to know that every single one of your emotions does carry a value. And sometimes the sorrow helps us to be able to look within. Sometimes the anger allows us to stand up and to do something. And so I do find that even with that anger and with that sorrow, if you're able to channel it into something, then you might be able to create an experience that you never thought of. For me, I'm partially here because I wrote like some of these books. The reason why I do my work, or also I want to say that like my clients, they've also been able to help me to write this book as well, because now I can see that people are benefiting, seeing themselves reflected in the written word, seeing their experiences that are reflected. So just to know that although these emotions are there and it can be challenging, there's ways that we can use them. Sometimes the suffering is just an indicator to show us that there's another path towards finding wisdom that can assist us. I also want to say that my work inherently is tough because my specialization is racial trauma. So that is the reason why in Black meditation, I talk about healing techniques. Also, Brandon is one of the people I interviewed for the Black meditation book, because he also uses skills and techniques that relate to being able to feel more free and connected in the body. But what I want to say is that as hard as the work is being a Black person, that's the extra importance that it is that we keep ourselves well and healthy. It doesn't have to be one person form of healing that we're going to be using. It doesn't, if we don't have a Black community that we are looking for, then there's ways of being able to bring certain types of resources that go beyond what anyone else can recommend to you. So what I will say is we use our emotions as an indication that we can create something out of it. In between my sessions with my trauma clients, I also use my energy techniques. I use healing techniques. I use different ways of being able to cut off the extra energy. And especially when I watch things like Fox News and all that BS, I have to cut off the energy after you listen to those narratives and start to create your own. And you will see that as you take charge of your narrative, we will change our relationship to the experience of suffering. We'll change our relationship to these emotions.
Yes, Ucheede, please.
Yes, thank you, David. That was powerful. To the question again, was it from Nina?
Mhm.
Yeah, I have a great friend in England. She's a historian, and one time I was ranting to her. I was reading and studying about slavery, and I was upset and I was angry, how these things could have taken place to our people, and it was so hurtful to me, and I had so much sadness and anger in my heart. And she told me, she said, no, Ucheede, she says, think of it in another way as well. Here are people that have gone through the most horrific conditions that we can't even imagine, and still within all that, when you study history, you find documents of Black people, African people, writing love letters to one another, showing tenderness to one another, engaging in writing humor and poetry to one another. And in the midst of all this sorrow and horror, you still find the capacity for our people to find beauty and humanity within ourselves. And I found that so incredibly moving and powerful to this day, how we were able and still to this day go through all that we go through and still find time to laugh and make jokes amongst one another, to still find humor in some of the most bizarre ways and humorous ways that we can think of. I found that gave me a tremendous sense of comfort and hope of our resiliency and beauty as a people, to find that humanity amongst ourselves, to still find that love and tenderness amongst each other. And there was another point you brought up about ancestry. And I find it incredible that descendant of African people, Black people today can recite the genealogy of people from the Bible, such as Jesus or the Quran, Muhammad and Moses and so forth. We can recite their genealogy blindfolded, off the top of our head, but we don't even know, some of us, we don't even know the name of our great grandmother or great grandfather, unfortunately. So I think one great thing that we can do, if we're in a position to do so, is to talk to some of our family members, an older uncle, an older aunt, a grandmother, a grandfather, and just ask them to talk a little bit about their background, their history, and find a way to connect to some of that history. It doesn't always have to be a grand history of, reading texts and huge historical books. We can talk to, if we can, if we're in a position to, talk to grandma, talk to uncle, talk to our older cousins, and learn a little bit about our family history, about how things were done with our family in not even doesn't have to go as far back as to Caribbean or Africa, but as you or someone else pointed up, how they go back 3, 4, 5 generations. That's your history. And that's something to be proud of, to learn about some of that history. And I think that gives a tremendous sense of power to ourselves and our identity as well, when we can connect to that type of history, that personal family history.
Yes, that's so true. Unfortunately, we only have 5 minutes left. I have to let us all be aware of the time, because they're going to kick us out at 6 o'clock. It closes. So I guess it would be more, yes, that one, exactly. The last one word to end this session. I would love for each of the panelists to share one word on how you're feeling about this, panelist. Or what's the one thing? What you guys have any? What we want to hear from them? The last thing. Last word. Last word. Yeah. Let's just go with the last word.
Grateful.
Grateful.
I'm gonna echo that. Grateful, and just real quick, that I know it might be a source of pain for some people to speak to their grandparents or whatever the case is. But that's something that I did. I asked my parents about their story because I didn't know it, and it helped with a level of compassion. First, anger towards my grandparents, because I was like, how could you let that happen? Mm-hmm. And then they told me their story, and I just understood so much. So without taking up too much time, but I super encourage that.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you, Chenna, the last word?
Oh, I see a word in the chat, and I think it sums it up for me so well, and that's enriching. That's for me. Oof, that's the word for me today, enriching, what I've experienced today.
I'm so glad to hear. Lisa.
Yeah, gratitude. Gratitude.
That's great. How about you, David?
Well, just a phrase is just, every revolution is grounded in love, and a deep love for ourselves, a deep love for our people. And even if we can't connect to our direct ancestors, there's the unknown ancestor that all of us are related to. The first Black woman, mitochondrial Eve in Africa, that even white people are descended from. So just to know that if it's not a known ancestor, there's an unknown ancestor that could still inspire that hope in you.
That's so great. That's so true. Whitney.
Also a phrase. Healing work ain't perfect, and ancestral work ain't perfect. Just tread lightly, navigate lightly, and try to do it with other people if possible.
That's so great. Oh my God, what a wonderful panel. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Well, we're going to be signing off now. I wanted to thank you so much for our panelists, and also thank you, Tiana. She deserves a whole round of applause for putting this Wellness Week on, as well as the rest of the team at the BPO. Thank you so much for this. Have a good evening. Have a good Friday, everyone. Bye.